For 3 weeks in August of 2010, I volunteered in a small village in Kenya called Salabwek. This trip was run in conjunction with Me to We, a subsection of the charitable organization Free the Children, and can be categorized as voluntourism, whereby people travel to a foreign country with some sort of volunteering mission in mind. The purpose of this 3-week trip was to help build a school in the village and to teach the students who attended the school. Before the trip, I was very excited at the prospect of making a difference to people living in a third world country. I was, as Me to We so aptly puts it, a shameless idealist, an eternally optimistic person ready and raring to make social change. Thinking back, it was sort of silly to think that I, a student fresh out of the 11th grade, knew anything about constructing a building. We ended up working on 2 different classrooms at the school in Salabwek, one new one and one that had been half constructed by people from a previous trip. Our primary job on the pre-existing classroom was chipping excess dried mortar from in between the bricks, making up the walls of the classroom. This spoke to the fact that the group before us were about as qualified as we were when it came to constructing buildings. We got to break ground on a new classroom and put down a foundation, but we got a ton of help from our fundis, the Kenyan men that were there to help us build. Fundi, translated into English from Swahili, means craftsman. We wouldn't have been able to accomplish as much as we did without them, which begs the question of why these men weren't doing our job in the first place. We were also tasked with teaching a few lessons to the village students. My friend and I chose to teach science, and we were told to prep a general lesson that could be modified depending on the grade level we were assigned to when we got to Salabwek. We had our lesson ready to go, but as soon as we got into the classroom, we realized we had incorrectly gauged their level of knowledge. Students in class 6 were learning things that I hadn't learned until I was in grade 9. These students were brilliant, and I felt as if I had failed them. In fact, I felt as if I had failed the entire population of Salabwek. I wasn't a teacher, a builder, or an engineer, but I came into the village thinking that I could make things better, that I could fix their problems. I was very wrong, and I wish I had done more research prior to my trip so that I could have made a more positive impact. The biggest lesson I learned on this trip was that sometimes the best intentions go awry. Here we were, a bunch of high school students, thinking we understood what was happening in Africa before we had even been there. The fact of the matter is that voluntourism is not a sustainable type of international aid. The $5,000 that paid for my trip could have been better spent on training or hiring carpenters and bricklayers to build more classrooms, or teachers who understood the Kenyan school system, or on buying more building equipment and materials, or even classroom items. This would be more beneficial to the Kenyan economy and a more efficient system, as they would not have to wait for a volunteer delegation to arrive to have classrooms built. My trip was unforgettable, and I do not regret taking it because I learned so much from the experience. Perhaps one day, when I'm a trained chemical engineer, I will return to Kenya and be able to actually work with the people there to bring about positive and sustainable change.